My name is Tony Utano. I'm the president of the Transport Workers Union, Local 100, the union that moves New York. We represent more than 46,000 workers in the transportation section. Nearly 40,000 of these workers operate, maintain, and clean the city's subway and bus systems for the MTA. We also represent workers at private bus companies, including Liberty Line Transit in Westchester County, also at New York Waterway, the school bus and tour bus industries. I want to thank the members of these important committees for bringing the workers' perspective to the issue at hand, the impact of the pandemic on the MTA, including its workforce, infrastructures, and finances. Before I go any further, I would also like to thank the members of these committees for enacting the accidental death benefit legislation for the beneficiaries of the essential public sector's workers who lost their lives to COVID-19. This sent a powerful message to those who are carrying the fight against this disease that you have their backs. As I stated in official announcement of this hearing at this time, as I state, 131 MTA workers have died of the virus. The majority of them were members of TWU Local 100. The remainder were members of Amalgamated Trains Union and other unions. No one at New York City Transit was immune. But these are just numbers, and they don't tell the story of who these wonderful people were, the vital jobs they did in the fight against this pandemic, and of course, the important lives they lived outside of their jobs as transit workers. Some were relatively new to the job, and some had more than 35 years of service. They were from every department in transit: buses, subway, stations, car equipment, bus maintenance, cleaners, track workers, single structures, and power. Almost all were loving parents and heads of household. One was an immigrant from the Dominican Republic who served his adopted country in the United States Army. He was just 41 years old and left a grieving wife and young son. Another was an immigrant from Egypt who had worked in the oil fields of Saudi Arabia. After his expenses, he sent every dime he made back to his wife and 3 children in Egypt. It was his dream to bring them all to America. One was an author of a popular fast-paced fiction novels. Another was a deep-sea diver. Another, a beloved pastor of an AME church in Brooklyn. And yet, another was so beloved by his passengers in the Bronx that some burst into tears when they were told that they lost their favorite bus operator had died of coronavirus. 3 of our lost brothers were elected officers of Local 100 who got sick while representing their co-workers in the subways. Many other union officers got sick as well, but were lucky enough to survive. One of them is here with me today. He's the elected chair of a major division within Local 100. He's Robert Kelley, the chair of Station Division, which represents thousands of station agents, collectors, railroad stock workers, wayfinders, and cleaners. I would ask that he be given the opportunity to say a few words after I'm done with this testimony. It is truly hard to describe the loss felt by the families and by the co-workers left behind in the depots, in the shops, in the barns, and in the crew quarters. Yet transit workers did their jobs every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, during the darkest hours of the pandemic. They continue to do it today as the dangers have subsided, but still remain ever present. There is much blame to go around for what has happened to us here in New York and across the country. We see the blame game playing out every day in the media. It is the central debate of the presidential race. It is my opinion that no one was ready for this crisis. Not Washington, not Albany, not City Hall, and certainly not the MTA. The MTA's response in the first days of the crisis was to dust off an 8-year-old pandemic operating plan written after the Ebola scare of 2012. And by the way, I just want to make a note that I've now just learned that they have a 2017 pandemic plan that I have never seen and was never involved in putting together. However, the fact that this union had to threaten service unless bus operators and conductors who wanted to wear their own mask were allowed to do so reveals the depth of the lack of understanding of what was happening in our country. We fought for every change possible in operating safety to mitigate transmission of the disease in those first critical weeks, including indefinite suspension of the Kronos fingerprint timekeeping system, rear door boarding and restricting rider areas for buses, cashless transactions in stations, daily disinfection of work areas and rolling stock, sufficient supplies of masks and hand sanitizer and optional face masks for conductors, a system-wide policy that riders be required to wear masks to get on a bus or train. We also fought hard for the surviving family members. We were successful in negotiating benefits for the families of our fallen heroes. This is a $500,000 benefit. It will not bring back their loved ones, but hopefully it will allow them to rebuild their shattered lives. I believe that our efforts in the media outreach forced the MTA and the city and state to take notice of the crisis of the homeless and mentally ill inhabiting the subways on the overnights, making it difficult to do our jobs and increasing the risk of assaults and virus transmissions. When the MTA ends its temporary suspension of overnight subway service for cleaning, strong enforcement is needed to prevent the homeless from squatting in the system again. The threat to transit workers and passengers from the pandemic is far from over. A second outbreak is a serious risk as schools are set to reopen and the city continues to expand its reopening plans. We want the MTA and the state legislature to commit to the following. No layoffs. Regardless of the financial concerns, layoffs of frontline workers cannot be tolerated. Transit workers are essential workforce. We face the dangers and pay dearly in death and illness for that responsibility. To now be told that our jobs may be expendable because of a financial shortfall is unacceptable. And quite frankly, a break in a vital trust that keeps us coming back to work no matter what the risks. There is no talk of police layoffs, firefighter, or healthcare. We ask this committee to adopt a statement underscoring our position on this matter. No layoffs, no matter what. Enforcement of mask policy. The MTA police, and the transit police must strictly enforce the mask requirement policy. This issue has led to disputes on buses and trains and has caused new concerns of assaults on the workforce and passengers. The MTA claims the mask requirement is being honored by as many as 90% of the riders. However, our Local 100 safety teams have monitored a number of bus routes in Brooklyn and Manhattan, where as much as 40% of the passengers boarded without masks. This is unacceptable. The MTA needs to expand its pilot program of mask dispensing machines to buses and stations across the system. We want the MTA to produce regular reports on the mask mandate, including the effectiveness or the lack of effectiveness of their enforcement policy. Workers and riders must feel the system is safe. Everyone wearing a mask is a vital part of that equation. Bus shields and safe space in subway. Bus operators, train operators, and conductors are the most vulnerable of the transit workforce. Their exposure to the public is constant. Bus operators encounter hundreds of riders every day. The subway, a single train, is capable of holding more than 1,000 passengers. On the buses, the shower curtains are unpopular among operators and viewed as ineffective. We are seeking the full compartment approach for the operators that some agencies in Europe and in a few American cities have already adopted. A permanent solution of the bus shield issue must be accelerated. In the subway, we want a free space or no entry zone established around the crew cabs to improve social distancing for our train operators and conductors. Testing. We ask for regular and rolling testing of percentage of workforce to weed out infected workers without symptoms, to quarantine for the proper time. The military academies, including West Point, Air Force Academy, testing students like this. We are at war against this disease. We must use every weapon at our disposal.
Mr. Utano, can you please wrap up? Your time has passed.
Okay, I'm almost done. The depth of the loss among the workforce demands that the MTA adopt the strictest and most comprehensive testing measures to avoid a second pandemic. Research. Local 100 has entered into a partnership with the New York University School of Public Health in a comprehensive study on why transit workforce was the hardest hit segment of all essential workers. We launched the study earlier this month. We ask that these committees go on the record in support of this study and to urge the MTA to cooperate fully with all New York NYU requests, including medical records. I'm almost done. One more. Hazard pay. Local 100 and the ATU have launched a multi-tier campaign to win hazard pay for transit workers. Maybe you have heard one of our radio commercials. We believe that essential workers have earned this pay. We believe that in the event of a second outbreak, workers will be far less ready to risk their health and families' health without an incentive like hazard pay. We seek commitment from the MTA that when they receive new funding from federal government, a portion of that money be set aside for the workers in the form of hazard pay. Thank you. I now would ask if Robert Kelley could be given an opportunity to speak, and then we'll be available for questions.
Thank you, President Utano. Thank you very much. Thank you, Senators. Thank you, Assemblymen, Assemblywomen, and all others. My name is Robert Kelley. I'm the Division Chairman for Stations Department. Quite frankly, I'm mad as hell, and I have to express.
Sir, we can't hear you, and we're going to have to ask you to stay to 1 minute. So you got to get closer to the mic. We can't hear you, but you're already on overtime. So can you get straight to the point?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That good. Our members was misinformed about wearing masks, refused PPE prior to the many deaths. To sit up here today and to listen to Chairman Foy say that all along we've had this PPE in storage somewhere and not afford us the opportunity to use them, well, quite frankly, it's appalling, to say the very least. I myself was plagued with this virus. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. I was out there on the front line trying to make sure that I could secure the safety of my members. In doing so, I took ill. While I was on my bed with 2 feet in the mud, thank God for family and friends and my brothers and sisters from the union that gave me that will to continue to fight and fight through it. I was one of the few that's survived in that respect, that was in my condition. But I'm here today to testify and to make clear that we have a clear and concise understanding that the MTA cannot continue to act in the manner which they did in the past and to try to sweep things under the rug like it doesn't matter. We was definitely not treated fairly. Going forward, I hope and pray that you guys see what's been happening to us and why we had so many losses that could have been prevented had the MTA did their due diligence, was to keep their workforce safe, and they failed to do so. In reference to the shutdown from 1 to 5, we have more than adequate enough cleaners that can fulfill the obligation. We do it on a daily basis. We clean high pressure hoses all day long around the ridership, and we do it very well. We've been doing it for years, so we can continue to do that. So the 1 to 5 shutdown is ridiculous. We're losing money there. We need to get money. As far as our booths go, we can't assist the ridership because we don't have money in the booth. Now we know we want to safeguard our members, and that is the first thing of all. First of all, I want safety first. But there are ways and methods that we can use to bring money back into the booth. We understand the Omni is coming, but it's not here yet. We do have an agreement that we are supposed to continue to act with the way we've been in the past so that we can move forward with the Omni. The Omni is coming before its time, and I feel like it's being forced upon us, and I feel like it's doing the terrible injustice to the ridership and especially our pockets. We're losing millions of dollars by not having money in these booths.
Thank you so much.